Lights, camera, action. Okay. John Turturro. Welcome and thank you for coming today.
Thank you for asking me.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about your early life, and because I don't know very much about your life in Queens and your family, and I know that you have significant Italian roots. And your dad was born there, but moved here when he was 6 years old.
Mhm.
And you still have some family over there and all of that. And you have an Italian passport. You have a real connection to Italy, and that's
Right.
a big part of your life.
Yeah, my mother's was Sicilian. Our parents immigrated here, and I think they got married here. They were from Aragona and Palermo. My father's family is from Giovinazzo in Puglia, near Bari. His father came to America, I think, when he was 15. He went back and forth a bunch of times. He lived in Mount Vernon, lived in the Lower East Side, and then he fought in World War I for the Italian Navy. But he established a residency, and then he went back. I think after his second time, he went back and he got married to my grandmother. And when she was pregnant, then he came back to America because my father was born in 25.
In Italy, though, right?
Yeah. They got pregnant in Giovinazzo, but then my grandfather Raphael came back to America, and that was when they had passed all the immigration laws in 1924, where they closed the doors to Italians, Jews, Poles, or a lot of Eastern Europeans. Basically, they had these draconian laws, and it took my father and grandmother, I think, 6 years. He had never met his father until he came to the United States in 1931.
Your dad, because your dad was
right.
6 years old, right?
Yeah, but so his father left when my grandmother was pregnant with him, and then there were all these laws because the immigration from Russia with all the Jewish population and from Southern Italians was huge, and there was a lot of people just said, well, there's too many of these people. First, there were the Chinese laws in 1882, and then they passed these laws in 24, and basically they shut it down. They shut it down completely. Like one year, there was like 204,000 Italians. The next year, there was like 4,000.
Wow.
Yeah, so, because there were millions of people who were coming, and the country was, especially in the cities, all these people spoke different languages. When you were Irish, when you came here, you were looked down upon, but you spoke the same language or a similar language, and the Jews didn't, and the Italians didn't, and the Poles didn't, and so it was Greeks didn't. Anyway, so my father came here, and then he wound up interesting enough, because he knew all those fascist songs, because Mussolini was the premier or the president or the leader of the country, but my father wound up fighting for the United States in World War II. And he was in D-Day and saw a lot of action. He was in the Navy. And so my connection to Italy is through Sicily and Puglia, which is southern, but they're very different regions. And, it was through music and, family. Didn't really see a lot of Italian films growing up, not when I was younger, when I was small. And it really wasn't until I saw like Dustin Hoffman, he's Jewish, of course, but in Midnight Cowboy, like clips of him. I couldn't see Midnight Cowboy. I was too young, and I was like, wow, that guy looks like someone from our family or something. And so then I saw Al Pacino and De Niro, and we saw The Godfather. That was a huge thing for a lot of Italian Americans, because I don't think we had ever seen ourselves represented. Even though it was in a mafia family, there was a whole family that was represented. And so it was a very exciting time. And then I was introduced, and I saw De Niro and Scorsese, of course, and And then later on, I got introduced to Italian films and Japanese films and French films, far in college. Really.
Yeah.
It was
'Cause
really
you
when
went
I
to
was in
SUNY, you went to
college.
SUNY New Paltz.
SUNY New Paltz. And it's really there. And through my friend Michael Bottalucco, who was a few years older than me, introducing me to a lot of different kinds of European cinema, and which I fell in love with because I saw all these cultures that I could relate to also.
And you were doing theater in high school before SUNY?
I did some theater. I used to do impressions because that was like, I used to watch The $1 Million Movie and Channel 5, all the Warner Brother films they had on. And so I grew up watching a lot of films from 30s, 40s, 50s. And, there wasn't as many films when I was a kid. In the 60s, it wasn't a great time. It was the 70s where there was that kind of explosion. So a lot of those older actors who were still, a lot of them were still alive. They were big influence on Edward G. Robinson or James Cagney, Betty Davis, Barbara Stanwyck, Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas. The late, loved, Ann Sheridan. There was a lot of Ida Lupino, a lot of actresses in those days that had, terrific, roles in movies. And so I didn't realize, I didn't differentiate between a man's film and a woman's film. I was just, would watch things with my mother and things with my father. But both of them were huge movie lovers because they grew up during, that's what people did. They went to the movies.
Of course, yeah.
So their relationship to those people was very, very, not like it was very specific. And I mean, I know people are fans now, but it's more maybe about celebrity, but they had really emotional attachments to these people.
Yeah.
And, they would watch it and they would be really emotional, when they watched certain things. When we watched Casablanca, my mother would get up and sing the French national anthem, you know what I mean?
And your mother was a singer, right?
Yeah, my mother was singing, but she of course my father had all kinds of, he loved it, but he was also, critical of the French. He was critical of everybody, but but the movies were like a point of discussion of things.
In the household.
Yeah, and then you would watch like $1 Million Movie, which Scorsese has talked about. It was like the first VCR because you'd watch the same movie. It was on five times in a row: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every night, same film. So you could study it. I mean, there were films that I know, like I could listen to King Kong. I can tell you exactly where you are in King Kong.
Oh my God!
I mean, I know, I can just tell you just from the music what's going on. I must have seen it.
You just saw it over and over again.
My brother, my older brother Ralph, his film was The Hunchback of Notre Dame with Charles Lawton, and it's a pretty good one. I think I really was a big, a Cagney guy, and Bogart. I mean, I loved, I never knew anyone in the movie business. There was a man who was a prop man who worked, a carpenter, not a prop man. He worked across the street. He lived across the street from us when we moved from Hollis to Rosedale. And in Rosedale, in Hollis, we lived in a small little garden apartment. We all slept in the same room, all four of us. And then we moved, and my older brother and I had a bedroom, and then my younger brother was born.
Got it.
But we all slept in the same bedroom.
Was your when you were launching yourself into becoming an actor, were your mom and dad were they excited? Were they supportive? Were they questioning what was going on? How did that work
I went
out?
to college. They didn't know what I was going to study. They saw me perform a little bit in high school, and they thought I had some talent. But my father wanted me to be a big doctor, lawyer, professional man. I was a pretty good student. I sloughed off a little bit towards the end of high school. But then when he saw me in things, he was really, he liked what I did and stuff. But my mother just said, her brothers were musicians. She said, just do what you want to do. And they knew I was a hard worker, and I was doing pretty well there. But they were, they were concerned, how are you going to make a living?
Right.
And, the truth of the matter is, any kind of person who was a minority or a person of color or whatever, you didn't see them represented a lot in movies. You just didn't. There was a few people that were, so a couple black actors. There were some ethnic actors, like Anthony Quinn or something, but you didn't really see a lot of that, until in the 70s. A lot of stuff happened. People were, all kinds of movies were being made, and so movies was far away from me. It wasn't until I went to see people perform in the theater that I thought, well, maybe I could do, what they do.
Well, that's a good transition, because
know.
there was a guy that I didn't know about, Joe Paparone.
Joe Paparone from
Yeah, and he was from New Paltz, right?
Yeah, he was
at
still a
SUNY.
friend.
He was at
Yeah,
SUNY. He's still a
a
friend.
good friend of mine.
And how did that? So you worked with him as your acting teacher, right?
No,
in
he
school?
was. He helped me. I couldn't get into NYU. I wasn't really polished enough to get into, and I didn't have the money to get into NYU. We barely had, money to go to school. I had a little money that I scraped up, and I got grant, and I got the basic BEOG and tuition assistant program, TAP it was called. And I got in as a departmental admission because I was a late applicant. But he helped me get in, and I had a lot of good teachers there: Richard Bell, Joe Paparone, Beverly Brum, Frank Kratt, Dan Schwartz.
This is all at SUNY.
All
New Paltz.
SUNY New Paltz.
SUNY New Paltz.
And Richard Bell and Beverly Brum were more of my acting teachers. And Beverly recently passed away, and she actually went to Yale. That's one of the reasons I applied to go to Yale many years later. And she really was a big civilizing influence on me as far as really educating me. She was this woman from Wisconsin. You would think from a very different background, but she was a great teacher. And Joe was very supportive. I mean, in fact, Joe Pepper said to me, the first major production there, I was 18, was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And he looked at me, he said, you should go out for that. And I said, yeah, well, I had never read the book. So he said, read the book. So I started reading the book. He said, you should go out for the Indian, because you could play an Indian. Because Italians, basically, they played Indians. I mean, no, they did. A lot of them. Anthony Quinn
That's true.
was sitting bull, and they died with their boots on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and this was all new for me. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood in Hollis. Then I moved to like a white Italian Irish neighborhood, and everyone thought that I was Puerto Rican, and there wasn't many Puerto Ricans, and they used to harass me. Then I got bussed out like to an all black junior high school. So I was always, I kind of grown up like as the minority in many places.
Right.
And it's interesting, when I went to high school, it was a private school, but it was I would say pretty integrated, like 60-40 or something like that. And I've always felt like, when I eventually wound up meeting Spike, for example, we're like 3 weeks apart. I was like, well, this has been going on my whole life. It was like, oh, here's someone, we know each other somehow. Like, and he grew up with all Italians, and I grew up exact opposite of Spike.
And it felt very familiar.
Yeah, and
immediately
we're still very close friends, and he's I value my relationship with him as a friend first of all. But so when I went to school, I wasn't that slick or educated, but there were people that I was inspired by. Like when I saw some Bob Fosse shows, and I saw Ben Vereen for the first time live, I was like, wow, look at this guy, look what he could do, and that was like, he kind of blew my mind.
Was that sort of the idea of the
And
triple
Pippin,
threat?
yeah, and Jesus Christ Superstar, and so when I went there, I didn't know I was going to go in musicals. I like dance, and I'd done some dancing and stuff. But anyway, I did audition for Cuckoo's Nest to make the roundabout story, and I got cast as Chief Bromden, and I guess I did a good job. But so I played an Indian. I mean, I've played so many things. Now I guess people are very. They say, well, you have to be careful about what kind of role you play. But recently, I did Discovering Your Roots with Dr. Henry Louis Gates, and I found out, not to my surprise, how mixed I am. You know what I mean? I'm really mixed. My DNA. But
you did the
yeah,
test.
I did. Well, I did a test from 23andMe, but when I did, they have a whole army of people, and I'm really mixed. But I'm from Southern Italy, so I could be 15 different things. So,
Right.
and
A lot of mixes.
and
Yeah.
I am,
And you are.
and I was like laughing. I was thinking, well, Spike wanted to know, like, how black are you? How black are you? I said, not as black as you think, but I got some, sub-Saharan. I got northern African sub-Saharan. But I'm from. So it's interesting, like Arabic music I listen to, and I'm like, wow, it just gets me, and so I'm interested in multicultural type of music. I always have been, and so I've spent a lot of my life playing different groups and exploring different groups. My 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 wife is Jewish, Russian Jewish, and so and Coen Brothers basically made me
An honorary Jew.
yeah, which I have a little bit in me, but it's the I think a lot of people who are people, either Hispanic people, either black, or you know dark Italian American or whatever, or Southern Italian American. You have to fight to get out of the ghetto. You know what I mean? Because you're basically put in these groups. You're like, this is your group. And I knew when I was an actor in college that was not what I was interested in. I like to play a lot of different things, and I've done Shakespeare, and I've done Chekhov, and I've done Beckett, and I've done Ibsen, and not that I'm Mr. Hoity-toity, but I love a lot of that those writers, Pinter, and I like to do different things, and even different things within my group or different groups. But I think I've really fought not to be, pigeonholed.
Yeah, not to be pigeonholed into one type.
No,
Yeah.
and that's a big thing, because in this country, you're not looked upon. You're looked upon. They put you in certain groups. When I go to Europe, I'm not looked upon that way. I'm looked upon as just a regular, guy. You know what I mean? Who can play different class things. And anyway, so I've gone to Europe a lot and worked there, and so
And you've acted in it. You've acted in
I've
Italian
acted in
language.
Italian.
Italian
I've acted with
language.
great Italian directors. I've worked with Francesco Rosi, Nanni Moretti, Marco Pontecorvo, who's upcoming. He was a DP, and
Yeah, we worked with
he's
him on Fading Sugar.
right. He's
Yeah.
a terrific friend, and there's other people I'd love to work with, but there are all kinds of directors I'd like to work with, and including people I've worked with previously, which be wonderful to have return engagement with some of them too.
Right. And when the what I heard about, I didn't realize that with Danny and the Deep Blue Sea, you sort of helped in the development of that.
Well, I did the first reading of it I don't know if it was the first reading. I did the development at the Eugene O'Neill Center. Lloyd Richards was the head of it. He was the head of the Yale Drama School, which I went for graduate school. I was out of school for a couple of years, and I did two plays, one by John Patrick Shanley and one by Keith Radine. They were both good plays, and I had lead roles in both. I think I got $100 for that, and I was thrilled. And then John liked what I did, even though he thought it was a little, maybe too, it wasn't dark enough. But he saw, I think, a lot of potential there, and then he kind of campaigned for me to do a little big reading at the Circle Rep. Then I auditioned for it again. I had to audition for it again, and I got cast, and I did it at the Actors Theater of Louisville, and then we brought it to New York, and I did it at Circle and Square with June Stein, and I got like a 3D World Award and an Obie Award, and I got a lot of people from movies who came to see it.
This is after Yale now.
After Yale.
So
right after Yale.
when did you finish Yale? When did that?
83.
83.
Yeah, I was in the same class with Charles Dutton and Angela Bassett and a lot of other people, David Thornton, who's a good friend of mine. And yeah, I was out of school from New Paltz, and then I was a school teacher. I did a lot of different, I was a sub. And
so you had a break between
Yep.
New Paltz and Yale.
I taught at Rice High School in Harlem.
So when did you finish New Paltz?
I finished New Paltz in 79, but I actually got out 78. I got out early, and then I was a bartender, and then I worked. I always worked construction with my dad on and off, and then I wound up because I had an English minor, being a substitute teacher at Rice High School, then later a school in Dyckman Heights called Our Lady Queen of Martyr, where I was a 5th and 6th grade history teacher.
So you did that, and
then I applied to Yale, and
Right.
I got in, and I got into NYU too. And I got a bigger scholarship to Yale, and NYU offered me a nice thing too, and I went to Yale.
Wonderful.
And that was a big, it was competitive, but I was, and I also had studied with Robert X. Modica in New York. He was a protege. He worked with Sandy Meisner for about a year and a half. So I'd continued studying, and doing showcases, and so by the time I went to Yale, I had a lot of stuff under my belt, even though I was shy, and I think I was able to take advantage of being out of school and knowing that it was never going to be like this again, because you did like 30 plays in 3 years plus classes, and I did everything: new plays, cabarets, and classic plays, and so Lloyd, I think, saw that I was a hard worker, and he was supportive of me. And then once I met with John Patrick Shanley, that was John and I worked together a few times. We've done plays. We did Five Corners together. And maybe someday we'll do something else together, because I love John, and it would be fun to do something together again.
Yeah.
I don't know what, but well, it's up to him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested.
He was a writer come director, really.
Yeah.
Moonstruck,
and John
of course.
is, John was like, I think he wanted me to be in Moonstruck too, but Cher had more say. So
there you go.
anyway, and it was good.
So your sister,
my cousin,
your cousin Aida and your brother Nick are both actors, and
right?
Both busy in the business, and
they hustle around.
Yeah, and then
I've worked with both of them.
I didn't know much about Richard Termini. Is this a cousin of yours or not? Or is that
he did some music for me.
He did music for you. He's done composed for you on your stuff.
A little bit, yes. Yes, in Mac he did. He did a very good job in Mac. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So I've worked with I've worked with my mother in Mac. I've worked with both my sons in a couple movies, Amadeo and Diego. I've worked with my wife, Catherine Borowitz, many times. So I've worked my whole family. They don't like listening to me, but I've worked with them all. So no, it's not easy. Not easy when you tell your mother, you have to be here at 7:00 in the morning. She says, no way. I'm coming in. She said, when does Al Pacino come in? I said, I don't know, 9:30. She goes, that's when I'm coming in. Diego was in Fading Gigolo. He played a Orthodox Hasidic kid, and Amadeo was in Illuminata and Romance and Cigarettes, and he was also in the Wes Anderson
Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah, he played the young Luke Wilson.
So how did your relationships roll out with Spike, Joel, and all the other guys that you met along the time that the Coen brothers found you, or in Spike?
No, Spike saw Five Corners, John Patrick Shanley. So, and he really loved it, and then he, sent me Do the Right Thing, and we talked, and that was the beginning of a long. It was 89. We met in 80. I think it was 88. Or maybe we may have met in 80.
We'll do the right thing.
Yeah. We met we met, I think, in 88. And he had seen that film, and he asked me who I wanted to play, and I said I want to play the the bad guy, or the racist guy, and that was a great experience. And Joel and Ethan knew me through Fran McDormand, because I went to Yale with her.
Oh, okay.
So they would come see me in plays and different things. And, one of the plays led to the Big Lebowski character. But they saw me in The Sicilian with Cimino, and then they saw Five Corners. And then they told me they were, I used to hang out. We used to Kathy went to Yale also. So we would socialize with Joel and Fran more than Ethan at that time. And then they told me they were writing me a role, and then they wrote Miller's Crossing, and I really wanted to do a good job, because I was like, wow, they wrote, they wrote this part for me, and Yeah, so that's how I met, and then from there,
Just
you know.
rolled out with
Yeah, yeah.
Barton Fink.
I mean, they wrote a couple parts for me, so yeah. And so once again, and I've worked with them. I worked with Ethan on stage when I directed these 3 one-acts for Broadway for one of his, one of Woody's.
that was
Woody Allen's.
relatively speaking.
Yeah, and Elaine May, and then they were my executive producers and very involved executive producers on Romance and Cigarettes, and they really stuck by me because we lost our distributor because United Artists and MGM was bought by Sony, and it was a whole, it is what happens with mergers of film, and they just were great friends and great supporters, and basically I would just, if they need me to do anything, I would do it.
Right,
I
of
mean, that's
course,
how it
yeah.
goes when you don't have that many long-term relationships. I mean, I do have long-term relationships, but when you get a return engagement with people, you kind of know each other, and you know that they actually are in your corner, and you could do something. You could try new things sometimes. That doesn't mean it always works, but many people I would have loved to have, like Francesco Rosi or Robert Redford, Allison Anders, a terrific director, Tom DiCillo. There's a lot of people I've worked with who are not famous people, who terrific filmmakers.
Well, Quiz Show is a wonderful project. Yeah.
So you don't always get a chance to do that again, but it's helpful because the first time you work with someone, it's trial and error, and you don't know until you see how they edited you.
Yeah,
when either enhanced your performance or destroyed it.
Yeah.
And a lot of actors feel that way. You go, oh my God, I wasn't doing that. And so it's a weird, on stage you're in control more. So
Yeah,
but you have to do it 8 times a week. So
that's a big deal.
that is a big deal.
You decided in the 90s to get involved in directing, and you directed Mac.
I didn't decide.
But I
didn't decide to do that.
Did decide to do Mac? No.
Well, everyone I thought about doing it, I did it as a play, and I was always telling the directors basically what to do and stuff like that. And then, Joel and Ethan weren't going to do it. Spike wasn't going to do it. Scorsese wasn't going to do it. I showed the script to all these
so you
people.
showed it to them
yeah,
before.
And they all saw them. And then I started looking for directors, and then I realized one day, I should just try to do this myself. And I met, my agent was surprised. And then I had a meeting with Nancy Tenenbaum, and Nancy had done Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And she said, you should do it. I sort of convinced her. And then she got me money. It was from the Ha channel to shoot 4 scenes to show that the film, even though it was a drama, had a lot of comedy in it too. It was like human comedy, like Chekhovian comedy, like in Scorsese's movies or Spike's movies, Coen Brothers movies, And so Larry Estes, who ran TriStar Columbia Home Video, he produced all these independent films: One False Move, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, on and on and on. And he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And I think we were one of their biggest budgets. It was over $2 million, and I got to make Mac, and won the Camera d'Or at Cannes, and some other. I got it didn't do fantastically in the distribution here, but it was very well
critically received
all over. And I got a lot of support in Europe for it. And a lot of people wanted to make my next film, and I still think. I mean, even though I wouldn't do it the same now, I think it's a strong movie. I think it's a really strong movie. It's a very raw movie, but it's a powerful movie. And you don't make movies about working class people,
right?
In any background, they're just not made. They're made about stereotypes, gangsters, but not people who are fighting tooth and nail to leave their little thumbprint, on the world. And like The Building Line, there's a million fantastic stories from the Brooklyn Bridge on, you know what I mean? And they never do it. They do the Titanic.
And
Titanic's been done how many times? 5 times, 6 times. Brooklyn Bridge, Ken Burns made a documentary. And there was a book, a wonderful book, on it, which I love. But, so that was a big thing when I did it. I kind of did it because it was something my father had passed away at a young age. And but there was something I grew up in that world. And I thought, these are really large people. They're actually in there making something, and that will last a long time. And that has had a big influence. My mother made dresses. My father made houses on me. So I could tell 10 stories about that. And there's lots of stories, but people, you can be ghettoized, and I'm very proud of that film that we weren't, that I fought to make it, and it's something really, it's still a beautiful looking film. It was shot on film. We had 43 days to shoot it, and
Which
I shot with
which is amazing.
I had all these actors that nobody knew. The only people knew were Ellen Barkin and John Amos. That was it. But then, Carl Coppertorto and Michael Bottalucco and Kathy Borowitz, they were the real leads of the film besides me. My brother Nicholas was in it, and a lot of people. Ola Krupa, Richard Spoor. It was a real, it's a passionate movie when you see it. You're holy mackerel.
And it was a well-supported film as an independent film.
Yeah. I mean, it
'cause it was the budget.
Samuel Goldwyn bought it. I could have been the second film from October Films, from Bingham Ray and Jeff Lipsky. And I kind of was leaning towards them, but I got outvoted to go to Samuel Goldwyn. But I always would have loved to have worked with Bingham. And Bingham helped me a lot on Romance and Cigarettes, not on Illuminata. He was with October then. They wanted to buy Illuminata, but we didn't want to sell it before Cannes or whatever. But and then Bingham gave me the green light for United Artists, and then he was fired.
At UA.
At UA. Bingham was a wild guy, but I loved Bingham. And I really, really, to this day, miss Bingham.
Yeah.
Because he bet on people, not just on the project. And now, doesn't matter who you are. A lot of times people don't want to get in a room with you. They don't want to look you in the eye and say, well, I'm going to bet on you, Charlie. I'm going to bet. I like your story. I don't get it completely. I don't know if I get all of it, but I believe what you're saying. You know what I mean? And Bingham was one of those guys. And he was the opposite of like Harvey, I think, in many ways.
Yeah.
He was his antithesis. He was a really loving person, and he was wild in his, in his business dealings with, the people above him. But he's really missed, and I think
I remember him well. I remember him seeing him at Sundance, and he and knowing him over the years in his role and working
Lincoln
with
Center.
Jeff.
He wound up at. I mean, I just even when he wasn't working, I would have meals with him sometimes, and he had his difficulties, and but he was a loving person, and
he was at Sidney Kimmel at the end of his life.
Yeah,
he was right at the very end.
Yeah,
that's where he ended.
Yeah,
which is which is an interesting connection for you because you've worked with Pinotti, with John.
Yeah, so it's a small world, and sometimes there's a lot of people who've said no to you, and you can't turn around and say, well, I'll never talk to that person again because there's only about 8 of them. You know what I mean, or whatever, but. I've fantasized in the past about, well, what would I be like if I owned a theater or if I was a distributor? I don't want to do that necessarily full time, but I do think there's a lot of things that are missed. And also now there's so many different ways to see a movie. So, I wind up going to like Film Forum or IFC or, now there's the Nighthawk, in my neighborhood, or BAM, and it's, I wish there were
more independent theaters,
long lines for kinds of films. Like I just was reading about Olivia Wilde's film that came out, and it's got great reviews, but people aren't, going maybe right away. But sometimes a film takes a while to get a word of mouth, to get it going, and it's not instantaneously, and I remember films that would play for like a year in my neighborhood, and then I would go see it, and I would go, wow, why didn't I go last year to see it, and so it's...
Now they disappear.
Well, I think those big, giant tentpole movies ate up the audience. Because when I was a young man, young person, young kid, I would see popcorn movies, Night of the Living Dead, and then I would go see a Sidney Lumet film. So there was no difference for me. But I feel like they've made it's like more of a juvenile audience. And I think video games has really influenced movies. Just like Saturday Night Live, when it came on, the kind of ironic, tongue-in-cheek, they influenced a lot of the comedies that were made, with Chevy Chase and Belushi and Aykroyd, Bill Murray.
The sarcasm.
Yeah, the sarcasm and stuff like that. People were more distant from them. It wasn't like guys who were in the middle of it, like Kirk Douglas or somebody, you know what I mean? Or, so now I think you look at it, everything looks like a video game to me. It's so fast and whatever. And I growing up, I loved comic books. I used to read comic books all the time. And I like a certain amount of comic book movies, but when I see that that's what everything sort of has become, then what you are interested in, basically television has taken over. And now it's hard to find what's on television because there's
so much of it.
I don't know. Do you watch Showtime? Do you watch HBO? Do you watch Hulu? Do you watch Amazon? Do you watch Netflix? It's exhausting. You're exhausted.
Just finding
it. You need someone to say, man, this is great. You got to see this. Like I would say, if I was gonna promote something, I'd say, listen, I saw the Amazing Grace documentary that my friend Jimmy Kurosawa was very much responsible for with Aretha Franklin. I said, if you want to go see a film about music, see that movie. That will blow your mind. That's like one of the greatest things you'll ever see. Like that will blow your mind. When I saw it, I was like going to church or synagogue or mosque or whatever it is. I saw it at Film Forum, man, and I was like, people were like packed. And I was like, this is how I want to see something, man. This is what I want to see. I want to be with a group of people occasionally to do that. But
to be in a cinema, not at home.
Yeah, but now I want to go see that again and take my wife. It's been playing now at BAM, so I'm glad. So I hope it seems like it's playing, but that's just an amazing piece of work. And I think documentaries are filling, lots of people seeing documentaries.
It's happening now, right?
Which is fantastic. I love, but I do think serious films or films with black humor, and films. I mean, this film that Olivia did, Booksmart, it's about young kids. So maybe all the young kids haven't got it to see it right away. You know what I mean? Maybe the kids who are 30. But, films I haven't seen it, but I'm going to. But I can't go the first weekend. Can't do it. My son's in high school. I got family things. You try. You know what I mean? So it's great. Like to see Spike reemerge with BlacKkKlansman.
Fantastic.
It's just, did my heart good because I know, man, he's also been in the desert too. And because, now people, patting him on the back and stuff like that. But a lot of times people say, oh, well, people said a lot of things about him, like, because he's been outspoken and he's been a real advocate in a way that, actually is justified. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just good to see that he was able to get an audience, with his TV show, with his movie, and because it's hard. It's hard to have a longevity in America. Because people don't think like, oh, well, this guy's a master, so Charlie should still keep making movies. Maybe we're not going to give him the $15 million that we gave him before, but we'll give him something, But doesn't work that way here. It's like, people look at you, young people, sometimes they have no track record, and you're like, well, this is what's going on now. You got to be in the moment. But you can be in the moment, but you can also be in the moment through your experience, because you may have something to add to the moment or help articulate the moment, because the moment is not just a moment. The moment comes from a long time ago that has gotten us here and is repeating itself in different ways just through, now we have technology, you know what I mean? So, there's a lot to understand. You take any topic, abortion, read about it and study it, study the history of it. It's the same thing that's going on now that was happening a long time ago.
Right.
And people don't know that abortion was legal in this country until the 1860s, and until women could, until there was quickening, until the baby kicked, and who were the first people who were against that? It was the medical profession. They wanted to, push the midwives out. And there's a wonderful book about it called When Abortion Was a Crime, but it tells you everything that you need to know.
Right.
Everything. There are so many complex issues, and that's what gets lost of the moment. There's nuance, and to understand things, you have to understand the minutia.
Yeah. Well, right now in Alabama, of course,
But
just turned it around.
So
in
people
in a political way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's people think it's all a religious thing. It's not necessarily.
So on the topic actually of the changes that are going on,
Right.
and all that, I mean, you have for you a life with a tremendous footprint of theatrical years and theatrical presentation health.
Yeah.
And now with then, as the world changed
Right.
and streaming started to take over, and as you described, there are so many choices you can't even find content anymore.
Right.
It's so hard to find stuff that gets curated and people get to see what they
Right.
want to see. You're also a producer and originating and then making your own decisions about what to be in. How do you feel right now about, you just sort of described how the business has changed.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I've worked at HBO. I did The Night Of. I just did In the Name of the Rose, which is now on Sundance, which was a big production. And that was wonderful to work on. And I'm doing The Plot Against America for HBO, based on Philip Roth's book. So I know with The Night Of, it reached a lot of people. And it really was like a movie. And I'd love to do part 2 of that. But then there's movies like Gloria Bell I did, which got amazing reviews. And, maybe they'll bring it back at the end of the year or whatever. But it's hard to find an audience for a film I know people who love the movie, but it has to stay in cinemas for a while, or even one cinema for a long time to grow into its potential. It's a different world. To stay viable, you got to go to the gym. You got to understand that the rejection is part of it. I think as you get older, it's harder to, you go, I'm going to get beaten up. I've always liked to do things that make an audience think, or maybe even feel uncomfortable. And I think things that are shocking sometimes, or surprising, or showing people that you would go, wow, I don't really like this person, but I can't take my eyes off of them. Sometimes you can learn about that. Not that you empathize or sympathize, but it gives you something to think about and takes you out of your comfort zone. And I think those kind of things I've always loved in movies that kind of shocked me in a good way, in a way that made me think about things, even if I didn't agree with the point of view of the filmmaker or whatever. And I love those kind of things when you see it. I think it's inspiring when you see that. I saw that show Fleabag. I guess I haven't seen the first season, so to say. And the woman who writes Killing Eve, and I thought, wow, that's very personal, and I really, really enjoyed that. So she's a young person, but she's very talented, and so I'm glad a lot of people are getting a chance to express themselves. But I think there's room for people of different ages in there, hopefully.
Adult movies.
Yeah, adult movies. And
you think when you look back at Paul Mazursky, John Cassavetes.
Yeah, well, I'm a John Cassavetes poem. I mean, I love those things. I mean, I recently saw A Woman Under the Influence, and I was like, that's a radical movie for right now. That movie is a love story about crippled love and how people love and they are unable to love, through mental illness, through masculine brutality, or being obtuse, but it's full of, it just made me feel like, oh, yeah, I know this. I've seen this, and these movies were radical. These movies were radical. These movies were full of humanity, and he influenced so many people. And some of his movies did well, some didn't, but, that's the kind of thing
Had a
that if I
documentary
could
feel.
do that more, that's what I would want. That's what I want to do. I would like someone to say, let's go somewhere, 12 weeks, 14 weeks. It's short, it's going to be only a smaller crew, whatever. That still inspires me. Great. I don't see the density of it is like a novel, and the contradiction of it. That's what I like. I like things that aren't. I mean, if you look at that movie Shadows, that's a pretty hip movie, man. I mean, about race in 1960. That's like considered one of the first independent movies. And there's stuff in that movie that you go, holy mackerels. Like, this is the complexity of someone, maybe passing, someone not passing. And just, it's really, that kind of stuff I really love. And I mean, listen, I love to be entertained and with a great comedy too. I'm not only one way, but I do think I think movies are not in the water cooler conversation. I don't hear people talking about, my Moonlight a little bit. I thought people were talking about that, it seemed. But I don't hear, I used to hear these heated discussions, about, Prince of the City,
It's great Sidney Lumet films.
Yeah, just, back and forth, I mean, if you look like a movie like Midnight Cowboy, it's like, it's pretty challenging.
Interestingly enough, now Network is on Broadway, which I haven't seen.
Yeah, I'm not interested.
It seems like that's something that didn't need to be done in a sense.
I don't know. That's a whole other thing. I mean, I don't know.
That was a great film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Sidney fan. I love The Verdict. I love A Dog Day, Serpico. So many of his movies. He really was a great storyteller, and the acting in his movies, you could tell everybody has brought their game and has rehearsed for 2 weeks before, because Sidney is not going to give them too many opportunities. And I mean, Spike and we talk about this all the time. When you watch it, you're like, that's like really, and sometimes the acting is really theatrical, but it's completely organic. I mean, you watch Dog Day again and you're like, and with A Verdict, and you're like, wow, people are superb. And these are people who have a lot of skill. I do think, actors who've trained and come from the theater or whatever, or circus or vaudeville or whatever, they bring a different thing to it.
They have to be on point, like a live theater thing, right?
It's like the body. You see the whole body. You know what I mean? And it's a great thing when you do it. And there's a lot of wonderfully talented actors now, but if you watch movies, it's predicated on editing.
Of course, yeah.
You don't know how people move that much. There was a few actors. Denzel is one of them. Is like, he's got a real physicality when he does things. Matt Damon, Cate Blanchett, you feel the whole body working.
The performance of their full body.
Yeah, but the full body, you feel it, and I always think is kind of like Christian Bale. I would put in there too. You know what I mean? He's in there. I like that. I see that. Not just guys being in shape or gals being in shape, but just the whole approach.
Right. And you had the chance to work with not only as an actor but as a director with Woody, and then you worked with Tony Scott and even Michael Bay on a few projects.
I've worked with
all
everybody.
these guys, with everybody. Yeah.
And exhausted.
And you're exhausted. I love it.
Michael Bay. When you say Michael Bay, I'm like, oh my, I got to rest. He never stops moving, Michael Bay.
And Michael Cimino once in the Sicilian.
I worked with him, yes,
Yeah.
for a long time. And Billy Friedkin.
And Freakin', yeah.
Friedkin, Cimino, Ron Howard. I only worked with Ron once. He's a lovely man. But I would have liked to work with Ron. Maybe I will work with him again. But I think he's a good director. And he's had a big range of interests. Marty, a little bit, but Steve Zalian, I think I've had a very close relationship with on the night of, very close with Steve and Richard Price, who was the other writer. So that was really intimate,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
So for you, like making films like the one that you've got going now, Going Places, which is the last project, you're year to year, and film to film. This is now what, your fifth or sixth directing
That's
title.
because I did Mac, Illuminata, Romance and Cigarettes. I did Passione, which was
Passione,
documentary, musical. Then I did Fading Gigolo. I done a couple shorts,
Now
and
it's
this would be my sixth film. So,
sixth feature film.
yeah, I think some people maybe want to retitle the movie, the Jesus Rolls Again or the Jesus Rolls or whatever, but they can retitle it if they want to. It's fine with me as long as they release the movie.
And that's your connection with John Pinotti, which has also been
John. I worked in Illuminata, Romance and Cigarettes, and this one. And John is a dear friend, and he's a great guy, and we've been through a lot of ups and downs together, and it means a lot when. When you have relationships over a period of time. Sidney Kimmel is a wonderful gentleman and a real supporter. And so,
in the same way that you talked about Bingham having your back in a sense, right?
There's a hard business because sometimes people, you take the money and then something works out. Sometimes you make a good film and, you get good reviews and then nobody sees it and doesn't make its money, loses a lot, money. And it's a crapshoot. And it's sometimes I need to step away to just rest a little bit and just go, but, okay, let me take stock. What do I want to do? You know what I mean? Or just heal up a little bit and prepare for another charge up the hill, but,
right.
I have lots of friends. They're like, well, I don't want to do that. They're like, I'm just going to do this. There's a part of me that thinks maybe I should have, if I could have, I would have just been an actor. And but I was interested in other things, so I don't regret all those movies I made. I don't think I ever made a bad movie. I'm not saying I made a masterpiece, but I think every movie I have made has real quality in there, and I can stand behind. And there's a lot of perception and love and humor and contradiction, and I think if I got a chance to work more, maybe I could get to that one that's perfect, or closer to just having everything work perfectly. But it's been hard. When I first made my first movie, people asked me to direct a lot from the studios, and I didn't want to because I was like,
you were asked to direct things that you didn't want to, that you decided not to do.
Yeah, well, they weren't my thing, so. So, I come from downtown theater, and there's a part of me that's still a downtown theater guy in my approach to making movies, and I remember Peter Falk and Ben Gazzara and Jennifer Owens had seen, Mac, and they all were big fans of it. And I was like, wow, I wasn't trying to make a John Cassavetes movies. I was trying to make a movie based on my experience and my, and I worked with Peter for years on adaptation of John Fonte's My Dog Stupid, which I wanted to do, which we never did. It would have been great. So I don't know, maybe someday I'll look at that again. But a lot of things I'm interested, they skirt, the polite line that is drawn in the sand, and I don't think it's good for people to be inhibited to explore complex situations, complex characters, whether it's a woman, a man, whatever, together, because we learn from that. We learn from that because sometimes by doing something that is irreverent or I wouldn't say scandalous, but it's thought provoking. Is can be really stimulating.
Right.
You're like, wow, okay, so that's part of life, huh?
But going into all of this now and then back to the idea of how hard it is and what it, and you talk about loving to go to the cinema, which I, of course,
Right.
am a big fan. I mean, my first job getting out of college was I worked as a projectionist in a repertory cinema with carbon arc projectors and
Oh my God.
showing old movies,
Right.
and I have a real love for exhibition and showing films in a public space and not having films isolated to home
Right.
viewing and the
Right.
social experience. And it was interesting in conversations that I've had with so many people from so many parts of the business about the arc of the business that your career has been through from the heyday of the 80s and the 90s of theatrical film being made and even independent film being made that would not be made the same way today.
Right.
Because, you right now you'd have an independent film that might be only a Netflix film, not a theatrical release.
Right.
And yet your projects, all of your films have had a theatrical life.
Yes, but sometimes I've had to, help that a lot.
To make that happen.
I mean,
Right.
yes, with Romance and Cigarettes, I helped distribute it.
You helped distribute it. Okay.
I did. I learned a lot about size of ads. You get great reviews, how long you can stay in a city, yeah, because I was stuck in this merger.
Oh, because that you were caught in the crossfire
I was
between
stuck in a
distribution. of
terrible
course.
merger, yeah.
Right.
And I had, we had tested the film, we had prepared posters, books, everything, and then everybody was gone in 2 weeks.
But what is your sense of anything that you've made and anything that you'll make going forward with the idea that a Netflix or that a streaming company would, although it's not necessary because there would be no theatrical or simultaneous theatrical day and date.
Well, listen, you can get theatrical and then nobody goes to see it. So if you get a bigger audience, I understand. I would prefer to see it in a movie theater. Yes. And you would hope that you would have a chance to at least have a portion of that. But if that's the only way you can work and do it, then you're going to have to, play by the rules unless you're one of the top 10 directors or big money makers, and I think when you're dealing with subject matter that may be, I keep forgetting the word, not scandalous, but controversial or whatever, or not being inhibited so much. Nowadays, sometimes one person touches the other person in the story, a fictional story, and they say, "Oh, well, that was a person was forcing themselves." I was like, "Wait a second, this is a fictional story." You know what I mean? It's like, and maybe that's part of it. You know what I mean? But it may be funny, or it may not be funny. You know what I mean? So, I think the thing is to keep working.
And I think
when people worked, like Caravaggio, he was in his studio. He made these paintings. He didn't make that many paintings. What did he make? 50 paintings, and he had the same props over and over again. The guy was, one of the greatest painters of his time and of all time. And then he was always in debt, and he was always running, and he killed a guy, and he was, so, the guy went to play a different place so he could work, the thing is to work. A lot of these people were never, they weren't that painters, especially, they weren't that celebrated. So I don't want to do something and nobody sees it, but just because more people see Transformers than Gloria Bell, that doesn't mean I think that's better than that. You know what I mean? I stick my hat with most of the kind of films I've made, but I don't look down on the other thing. But I think what you want to do is
create a body of work.
Well, people have seen certain movies. They say, "I really love that. That meant a lot to me." And sometimes 20 years later, and you go, "Wow, that means something." to me, more than someone recognizing me, who I don't care that they recognize, but that they, and if I made someone laugh, that's good too. That's a good thing too, you know. But you see the culture has gone down, and that is reflected in the world we live in. Culture is always ahead of politics. And that's all I have to say. That is a direct reflection, whether you're liberal or conservative, you have helped lower the bottom, the line of things.
Lowering the bar.
You've lowered the bar, and now you have the result of that bar that you have lowered. And so no one can say to me, money, just because a movie made a lot of money does not make it a good movie. It doesn't. It's a popular movie for the moment, but you have to see how it lasts. You may see a movie that's a really good movie and say, you know what? That's going to last. You can see Get Out and you can say, I could see it again. It's a good movie. I bet you 10 years from now, it'll still be a good movie. You know what I mean?
Are there films that you go back to that are from?
Yes, all the time. But I don't think that money in this country has become, it's replaced. I hate to say spirituality, but it's like God. Money is the God in this country. And that's why we're in the situation we're in. And I know that in the deepest part of my body, because I saw it happening. I mean, reality television helped create the reality television world we're in. It did, because people believe who you're playing on that thing.
The idea of creating fame from social media, creating fame from unscripted.
It wasn't from social media. That was a television reality showing
but
these
unscripted
people.
television, though. Unscripted television, reality TV.
I can understand the appeal of it to a point, but I've always loved people who have intelligence, skill, grace. I mean, I could watch Burt Lancaster walk across a room, and I'm like, wow. I could, I work with Ossie Davis, and it's like, guy was a powerhouse, like a powerhouse man. Like you just were like, wow, that's Ossie Davis, man. And you're like, he went through all these different, and you were just in the presence of something. There's a whole body behind that person, and they were in a movie together too, Scalp Hunters. So, I like to look up to people.
Right.
Say, wow,
exactly.
that's what I want to be when I grow up. And I still like to look up to people, but there are people from the past, obviously, they mean more to me, probably in my mind, in my imagination. Do you know what I mean? So, than maybe current people do. But there's a lot of talented people out there. But I do think the bar there's a cacophony of noise, and it's very hard. And I think I will use that movie Moonlight as a good example. I think the director was able to cut through in a very quiet way, of the humanity of those people. And it made you say, huh, wow, I never saw that. And I'm very appreciative of that. I am. It doesn't need to be people screaming.
Because maybe the idea that as technology changed, when I started out in the film business, we shot 16, 35.
Right.
There were crews. You couldn't just, everybody was not a filmaker.
You can be a filmmaker like in 2 seconds.
In 2 seconds. Now everyone
everybody's
believes they're
editing.
an artist.
No, everybody's editing, kids are editing. They make those things. They change the special effects. But it was harder. So maybe because it was harder, people hone their point of view more. Now it's very much more self-conscious, and it's, people are commenting on comments on comments on comments.
And it's a volume of content that can be made.
Right.
That's endless.
Well, that's the world that we're in. And, that's, that's why people like to go to watch sports or something like that, because it's like it plays in its real time. Then we have all these shows where everybody just talks about it. Like, I watch First Take also, with Stephen A. But he's, I enjoy him, but I do like to watch like I'm a big basketball fan. So just because they're doing it for real, they're either missing or scoring for real. So same thing if you watch a live performance.
Right, live performance
Yeah,
theater.
so-
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
So
course.
it is what it is. Every generation changed. I think things have changed a little faster now. They've accelerated. And the thing is not to be a grumpy old, person, man. The thing is to say, hey, I dig, Donald Glover. He's a really interesting guy. I saw that video he did. I've seen his show a little bit. I don't watch it all the time, but I could tell he's really talented. I saw that video he did, and I was like, wow, that's really strong. So you want to be in touch and supportive of young people too. And you want to be part of that. At the same time, you want to be able to, throw in your little 2 cents. You know what I mean? And that's the challenge that people have. That's what it is, So I can understand why some people just say, you know what, I had enough of this and walk away. Like the guy who did Sweet Smell of Success, Alexander McKendrick. He was a great director, did all the Ealing comedies, and he just said that's enough. And he taught. But, because it's exhausting. There's a lot of gatekeepers. That's the problem. To get to an audience, there's a lot of gatekeepers. I may meet some of these gatekeepers in the
Later.
afterlife. No, but I'm just saying there's a lot of gatekeepers. And those people, whether you get a good review, bad review, the people give you the money, they're not people who can do it. They can't blow that horn. They can't hit that note on that trumpet. And I'm using that as a metaphor, of course. But, the people who can. And they know it. And the other people, they're only projecting and pontificating upon that or blocking that. So there is something truthful when you see someone who's a real brilliant talent. I just was introduced to this woman, Rhiannon Giddens. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She's a great singer and banjo player, and she plays. She had a Carolina Chocolate Drops, and then she's cut some albums. She has a new album, There Is No Other, with this guy Francesco Torrisi, and he's fantastic too. But she's a fantastic talent, and just listening to her, you're like, wow, the soul that comes through that woman, man. You're just in the presence of something rare. And I'm just, like, I would just, I'd make a movie about it, her document in 2 seconds. 2 seconds. I told her, I said, listen, you want to make a musical documentary, man, I'm there. I said, she's
A presence.
yeah, and she understands the arc of history and how things were co-opted. And it's just something. So when I see people like that, I'm like, wow, that's encouraging.
So you're still inspired by new talent all the time.
Especially musicians.
Right.
Especially musicians. I like to support the musical world. I do. So I'm going to make another one of those. I know I am.
Something, a film that involves.
I like the
involved.
multicultural traditions that you see, with things that came from Africa, from Sicily, from the Middle East.
Like what you did with Passion.
Yeah, and then it winds up like down south. You're like, well, how do all these sources get there? And so it interests me.
Right, the cultural story behind it.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's right.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered quite a lot,
Okay.
my friend.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, this
It
was
a
really
pleasure.
awesome. What a
Okay.
pleasure. Thank you for
You're a
coming,
good man,
John.
Charlie. Okay,
Thank you.
we're not in Poland.
We're not in Poland anymore.
Okay, all right.
Funny story at the end here, though. When I would go to festivals with Bingham Ray
Right.
over the years, periodically, I was a little bit heavier at that time, I'd be walking up Main Street in Park City, and someone would grab me by the shoulder, and they would say, Bingham? And I would turn around, and I'd say, no, Charlie. And they used to think from behind, because I was shaved, that I was Bingham.
That's mistaken for a good guy.
Like for a good guy,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay. All right.
Thank you,
Thank
man.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.